everyone, and welcome back to Prep Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Vartika Bhandari, back with another exciting episode with one of our students, Austin Ho. Austin got a whopping 35 out of 36 on his ACT exam. He recently got acceptances from Brown University, Stanford University, and Rice University. And if you are one of the aspirants of abroad education, you know how difficult it is for a student to crack into such reputed colleges. And as difficult as it takes a lot of work in the student's college profile to stand out and hold a position in the mentioned colleges. So, now, with that being said, let's welcome Austin and begin to understand how he managed to bag such outstanding achievements so you can learn from him and understand what it takes to be in the world's top universities. So, Austin, welcome to Prep Talk Podcast. We are so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So, first of all, I'd like to officially congratulate on behalf of Tutela for all the three major acceptances that you've got. And these three colleges are something that, students really aspire to be in. And I know there must have been a lot of hard work getting into those colleges.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I feel extremely lucky and fortunate to get into these schools. And a lot of hard work was put into my application. A big part of it was with the help of Tutela. I mean, you guys were super helpful in preparing me for AP exams, preparing me for standardized testing. And so I just can't thank you guys enough because I know that that was a big, important part of my application.
You're most welcome, students like you make us believe in the work that we do, and all paid off when you get into such great colleges that you've always dreamed of. So, my first question to you is, how did you know that ACT is the one exam that you wanted to go ahead with? Because we know there are two standardized tests, right, accepted by the colleges in the US, ACT and SAT. So, how did you know that ACT is the right one for you?
Yeah, so Tutela actually was very helpful in that decision. I, like a lot of underclassmen, I was sort of panicking because I wanted to get the standardized test out of the way as early as I could, so that
Mm-hmm.
I could free up more time in my like later in high school to do more extracurriculars to focus more on AP exams. So I came to Tutela, I think as a sophomore,
Mm-hmm.
and I was sort of all I knew about ACT and SAT was that ACT was much faster paced and it had less English or STEM, whereas
Mm-hmm.
SAT was longer, basically the opposite.
Right.
Tutela provided me with two diagnostics, one for each test, and I did about the same on both tests. But then I realized after speaking to my mentors that I was a stronger STEM student and like my English sections weren't too strong. And so I thought that
Mm-hmm.
it'd be more appropriate for me to take the ACT exam.
Okay. So, as you begin your journey into ACT and getting a 35 out of it, by the way, congratulations on that as well.
Thank you so much.
How did you face the challenges that came across? As you said, that English was not that of a strong suit for you, and then STEM came across as more your, strength. So how did you deal with the difficulties that you were facing in the ACT prep, and which one was the easiest and the toughest section for you?
Yeah, so at first, I mean, this is something I think a lot of students will face, like will find challenges in. It's like pacing yourself during the ACT. For me, the hardest section was easily the reading section.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest one was, well, I think they're all quite challenging sections, but I'd say the most doable one was the math section.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because I'd say the first 40 questions for math um, were like were pretty you can go through them pretty fast. So I like to go through them pretty fast, and then the last 20 questions you can spend a little more thought on it. But the challenge with the math section really was sort of pacing yourself so you're not going too fast or too slow. Because
Mm-hmm.
I've done mock tests where I've finished too early. I've also done mock tests where I barely finished the math section. And so the problem with finishing too fast is that I make too many careless mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the problem with finishing too slow, obviously, is that you end up guessing the last couple of questions, which is obviously not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so being able to strike that balance was super important, and I think that my mentor Somendra was super helpful in guiding me through it. We did a bunch of diagnostics together, so We got through it pretty well. As for my reading section, I worked with Prashansa,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the biggest takeaway with that section and how to get over it is you really need to focus. You can't afford to get distracted in that section. And in the math section, I usually don't really look at the clock. I just sort of work at my own pace. But reading, you really have to look at this clock after every passage, just to make sure that you need to speed up a little bit, or you have some time, you can read over the questions more thoroughly. But mine, what's it called? Passage mapping was super key. So sort of skimming the passage, read the first and last sentences of each paragraph, and then sort of mapping out what are the important points and where are they. Because I find that the reading passage is sort of like a word search in a sense, where you're not really analyzing anything. You're sort of copy pasting answer choices from the text. So as long as you can find those pieces of information quickly, you should be fine.
Okay, cool. Understood. So, as you spoke about having a balance, right? So, how did you manage? Like you just mentioned that you appeared for six APs last year, and then you're currently appearing for five more APs. Then you had your ACT, and you have your school academics that is going on. And then you did some amazing extracurriculars as well, where you launched your NGO and you did a lot of stuff to have that strong portfolio. So how did you manage all those things? Because it takes a lot of multitasking, I know for sure that managing all the things together and keep doing it right and achieving the goals that you're setting yourself into. So how did you manage all those things? I think this is something that students should know, that not being scared is one. And then how did you just manage? I really want students to learn from your managing skills.
I think that one thing that definitely worked in my favor was COVID lockdown. So in
Oh,
Jakarta, we had a period of 2 years
right.
where we really had to stay at home. And so, this was really demotivating at first. It was very easy to get lazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that, Jakarta, much like India, we have very horrible traffic. So just going to school every day and coming back is like an hour each way. So I found that COVID actually saved a lot of time for me, and also saved a lot of
Mm-hmm.
energy,
Mm-hmm.
because I saved a lot of time that I usually would spend on the road. And I also saved a lot of energy, like walking around school, talking to other people, because this was in an age where you go into class for like an hour, and then you could like nap for 10 minutes and go to your next class, right? It's just like from the click of a button. So I think
Yeah.
that that extra time, that extra energy was definitely a big contributor to managing a lot of tasks. I'd say that
Right.
with schoolwork and AP exams, they sort of overlap in the sense that if you do well in school, you'll likely do well
Mm-hmm.
in your AP exams, because
Mm-hmm.
you're sort of testing the same thing, right? So if you get good grades
Right.
in school, you should get good grades on your AP exams. And
Mm-hmm.
I took pretty challenging courses. I tried to take the most rigorous course load in my school. So I took AP Lang, which
Mm-hmm.
was also quite similar to the ACT exam. You had like these reading comprehension passages that were also as difficult, if not harder, than the ACT passages. So while
Mm-hmm.
I was practicing for my test at school, while I was practicing for my AP test, I was also sort of at the same time practicing for my ACT exam. And so I think was super beneficial for me. And
Mm-hmm.
as for my extracurriculars, I think that uh, the biggest thing was sort of just finding a passion that you like, because
Mm-hmm.
um, that will naturally lead you down a path. And all the stuff that I did, it started off as like something that I was just simply interested in, and it's just sort of snowballed. And I think that you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna face a lot of challenges while you're exploring these extracurriculars, and that's why it takes passion, because if you don't really like what you do, you're gonna give up when you face really difficult obstacles.
That's true. That's absolutely very true. Yeah. So, okay, so what all APs are you taking, and how do you think they're helping you with the major that you have selected for the college?
Yeah, so I'm actually taking, so last year I took AP Lang, AP Micro, AP Calc AB. My school doesn't allow juniors to jump straight to
Mm-hmm.
BC. So I took Calculus AB last year. I took Physics 1 and I took
Mm-hmm.
Chemistry. This year oh, and I also took AP Stats independently. This year I'm taking AP Literature, AP Micro, literature, BC, physics 2, and bio. So I think that physics and chemistry, I'd say chemistry was the biggest influence for me because I really enjoyed chemistry. Mukul was my teacher at Tutela, and he really made me like chemistry, and it got me really interested in thinking how I could apply it to the real world. And that's actually how I started my water purification
Right.
project. I'm also planning to major in environmental engineering, which ties in well with like a lot of the work I do.
Right. So talking about the projects and all the things, keeping the, test prep aside that majorly influenced your student resume, were the work that you did, talking about the internships and the projects that you launched and that you worked under some professors as well. So I would like you to brief a little bit about those projects that made you stand out really well.
Yeah, so I actually didn't do any internships during high school.
Okay.
I spent a lot of my time solely doing you could call them projects. So the one thing I did was that I got in contact with this um ex-Cornell professor. And he's the technical director of a nonprofit in the US called Agua Clara Reach.
Okay.
And so I sort of contacted him, and he sort of served as my mentor for a couple of months as I tried to learn this gravity-powered chlorine dosing system
Mm-hmm.
that he took like a decade to design to help low-income communities gain access to clean water. And so once I learned that, I reached out to Habitat for Humanity
Mm-hmm.
to install and build these systems in 4 communities where I impacted over 1,000 residents. And so there, our work was sponsored by Amazon. After that, currently, I recently landed a collaboration with USAID uh, through 2025. And so our work is similar to what I did with Habitat, sort of working in those communities where, government pipelines don't provide clean water for, and a lot of them drink directly from nearby rivers or groundwater wells, which, the water that they drink looks deceivingly clear, but
Mm-hmm.
has a bunch of coliform and E. coli in it that cause diarrhea, that cause stunting. But a lot of them don't realize that because they think it looks clear. I shouldn't have any problem with health because it's clear. And so that's the perception that I'm trying to change now. Just sort of helping them realize that the water that they're drinking is dirty and is causing them a lot of um, like bad health effects. Um, and another thing is that in Indonesia, a lot of residents think that drinking chlorinated water can kill you.
Okay.
Chlorine only belongs in, and there's just this negative stigma of drinking chlorinated water, which is completely wrong. And so I collaborated with a Yale professor to run a pilot experiment of using a medical diary. It's like a normal diary that sort of helps residents track their diarrheal experiences before and after consuming chlorinated water. And so that sort of allows them to realize for themselves how chlorine helps them because they can visually see the difference before and after drinking chlorinated water.
Okay.
So that's what I did with related to chemistry. The
Mm-hmm.
whole dosing mechanism, how much to dose was also very important. You get those numbers by doing something called an iodimetric titration. So that's really where I applied my chemistry interests.
Right. That's a lot. But I'm sure you must have learned a lot going under these process and working with the professors and gaining from their experiences.
Yeah, I definitely did. And it's sort of like I after I did this project, it's an ongoing thing. I actually branched out to a lot of other environmental initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did was that I reached out to my local zoo, and I'm currently trying to raise funds for their Komodo conservation program.
Hmm.
So the Komodo dragon in Indonesia is a critically endangered species, um, and a lot of a lot of the world sees these dragons as these ruthless human-eating creatures that are just so scary. But I personally was just, when the first time I held it, I was just so amazed that something I thought only existed in storybooks could come to life. And so I've never had a bad encounter with Komodo dragons. And I think that as long as you don't bother them,
Hmm.
they won't bother you either. And so what I try to do with my website, it's called savekomodos.org, is I went to the zoo to photograph all of their Komodo dragons. And I sort of talked to their zookeepers and figured out, what how do these dragons behave on a day-to-day basis, and gave them personalities
Hmm.
that uh, we humans can relate to, hoping to humanize them and build empathy between the donor and the dragon. And so that's what I'm trying to do there. I also visited Komodo Island, which is the last place on Earth where you can find these dragons in the wild, where I covered a folklore talking about how um, residents of Komodo Island actually think that they are related by blood to the Komodo dragon,
Oh,
which you can also check out on the website. Yeah.
that's really
Uh,
nice.
I did two I did two other things as well. I did some research into mycorrhizal fungi, which is a carbon sequestering biofertilizer. And I have a research paper currently pending in a science educational journal. And I also have a very strong love for swimming. I actually swam varsity for 2 years,
Oh, that's nice.
minus the 2 years. Yeah. So from that experience, I built a um, drowning detection bracelet called Orca, and I have a patent pending for one of the mechanisms I used in that model.
So I see that from all the projects that you've worked in, there is a lot of awareness about everything that you're doing, right? About the water that you said, the clear water does not mean it's right to fit for drinking. And then you're also creating awareness for saving the Komodo dragons. And I actually saw this article the other day that some scientists, I don't remember the country, but they're trying to reincarnate mammoths and the dodo bird.
Oh yeah, I read about that too.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really nice that people are, now branching towards creating awareness that we don't have to end up reincarnating dead animals, and then what we can do now is much more significant than regretting later on. And I'm really glad to know that at such a young age you're doing so much, and you have great potential, man. It's really nice to know everything that you've been doing is so nice.
Thank you so much.
So let's move on to your student resume. And from all the things that you've told, I don't think there was any reason for Stanford or for that matter any other college to, reject you. You have shown the potential to be in one of the best colleges in US. So can you walk us through the process of creating your student resume? What all things you had in mind? And did you give an interview or not? And how was the entire process?
I say that just I wasn't really thinking about those things. I was more of just I was just going with the flow.
Okay.
And I think that a big thing to think about when you're applying is to have a common theme in your application.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the work I did is related to the environment.
Right.
It's also some engineering laced here and there. So I think that not doing things that are too drastically different is very helpful, because it shows admissions officers that you're passionate about one thing.
Right.
I think that that sort of creates a stud in your
Mm-hmm.
application. It's better to have one stud rather than to have like good at many different, but like many drastically different things. I mean, I still am in complete shock. I don't know how I got into such good schools. I wish I could tell you the exact reason
I was
for,
about to ask how
what
was your reaction when you saw you got into Brown and Stanford and Rice. So, yeah,
I really wish I could tell you like what exactly it was in my application that pushed me through, but I think that it's you have to look at the whole image, and I can't really pinpoint what it is. I'm still in complete shock, honestly.
yeah, it takes some days. It's just very recent that you got to know.
Yeah,
So it will take time to sink in. I'm sure of that. So unless you are there,
definitely will.
it'll feel surreal for some time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like this whole thing of me graduating high school as well, and preparing for college, it's a big jump. So that's also a realization that I have to, get over, is that I'm actually gonna be an adult now.
Yeah, you're going to be an adult now. So, have you finalized any college yet out of the three? I have you been accepted to any more other than the three?
Yeah, so the reason why I actually said I was so shocked about these schools, I did restricted early action to Yale, and I was deferred, and then I ended up getting rejected in regular. But in the earlier stages of the process,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I got into University of Virginia into the Rodman Scholars Program.
Okay.
I was deferred from U Michigan early. Um, and I think that the early stages were a bit rough. I got waitlisted from UCLA,
Mm-hmm.
waitlisted from Northwestern, waitlisted from Carnegie Mellon. So it was honestly a huge shock that I got into the schools that I got into. Um, I think that this whole process um, doesn't tell you. I think it's just a big lottery in a sense. Um, it's so random. I honestly don't even know what these schools are thinking. That's why I was honestly
They're
so shocked,
thinking
and I
good.
still
You
am.
shouldn't doubt, put yourself in self-doubt. They're thinking good. You've done some impeccable work. I'm sure of it.
Like,
Because when I was 16, 17, 18, I was not even close to where you are right now. So you've been doing great. And I
yeah, yeah. Like, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what they were thinking to accept me or why they accepted me. I'm honestly just in shock. I think the biggest thing is just stay positive, stay strong. For everyone who's applying next year, if the early stages of the process aren't working in your favor, don't compare yourself to other people, because that energy that you're using to sort of get mad at yourself or think, oh, I could have done better,
Mhm.
like that's energy you could use to improve yourself. And I just think that uh, you should feel accomplished that you've gone through so much in high school. Um, and you should just stay positive, stay strong. I know it's difficult, but this is my personal belief that if you stay positive, then positive things will happen. But if you're negative, then maybe not so positive things will happen.
Your thoughts manifest what you're thinking. So yeah, you just trust the process.
Yeah, have full confidence in your application. That's all.
Yeah. So the last question to you, I swear, I won't take more much of your time. So have you selected, finalized any college as of now? Are you still thinking?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna go to Stanford. Uh, before I got in, I was really stuck between Brown and Rice, because Rice is a really strong engineering school and Brown's an Ivy League.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm gonna go to Stanford.
I have seen a lot of students, been driven towards Stanford. I don't know what it is. I've never been there. I have no idea. But then I see a lot of students influenced by Stanford, which is, I think it's good. Maybe you can go there,
Um,
and next podcast you can let me know that what is that influences students so much towards the university, towards Stanford University, and maybe our next podcast could be your experiences at Stanford.
yeah, I can't wait for that podcast
Yeah,
episode.
yeah, let's do this. So 1 year down in Stanford, and we're doing the next podcast for sure.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here and giving us your precious time. And now you can go back to your environmental stuff. I won't take much of your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And to all the listeners, thank you so much. I hope this podcast was really helpful for you. And Austin had some really amazing tips that you can also implement. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.